Hey, DePaul Blue Demon fans, I'm Leo Blavin with your Blue Demon download for Tuesday, June 22nd, recapping this past week in DePaul athletics and previewing what's ahead. Last week, DePaul announced a 5-year multimedia rights partnership with JMI Sports. This partnership makes JMI Sports the official corporate partnerships and multimedia rights partner for DePaul athletics. Through this partnership, DePaul Athletics and JMI Sports will seek to develop valuable relationships with sponsors and generate new revenues to support DePaul athletics while enhancing the student athlete and fan experience. DePaul Athletics also announced a new comprehensive entrepreneurship and brand development program for student athletes at DePaul, who will soon enable Blue Demon student athletes to fully leverage name, image, and likeness legislation, tentatively slated to go into effect in Illinois on July 1st of this year. The Legacy program will provide student athletes training on NIL rule changes, digital tools to assess their personal brand, and a variety of educational opportunities from industry experts. In the NBA, former DePaul men's basketball players Max Strus of the Miami Heat and Paul Reed of the Philadelphia 76ers became the 20th and 21st former Blue Demons to compete in the NBA playoffs. For a look back on how some previous Blue Demons performed in the NBA playoffs, follow at DPUAthDev on Twitter and Instagram. This week, we highlighted Stephen Howard, who played in 15 career playoff games for the Utah Jazz. This week, I had the chance to interview volleyball assistant coach Nick Vogel about this spring's unique season, as well as this upcoming falls team. Dax, roll the tape. Well, this week, we have the pleasure of being joined by volleyball assistant coach Nick Vogel. Nick, thank you so much for joining us here on the Blue Demon Download.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So it was an interesting year for volleyball. You usually play in the fall. This year, you played in the spring, and really a condensed schedule, just trying to pick up matches wherever you can. You finished the year playing a Big 12 opponent to wrap up the season. So a somewhat unusual schedule, but what was this last year just like trying to navigate things with your team when you didn't know when the season would start and we're sort of just hoping for the best?
Yeah, I mean, as I'm sure every coach out there can tell you, it was a whirlwind, and it pointed out pretty quickly who around you is a problem solver and who is not, because there was no playbook that has ever been written for this. So kind of speaking a little bit to how our season went, it's funny because our season almost went completely in reverse. Not only did we play in a completely different part of the year than we normally do, but we started off with some conference play and ended up finishing the year with non-con, which is very opposite how we normally go about things. So it was definitely a bit of a curveball that we had to hit. But we came out of it pretty well. We only played 11 matches, as the Big East definitely abbreviated their conference schedule more than most conferences did. But within those 11 matches, we got to play all 8 of our conference matches, pick up a few extra matches around the bend there, and we actually finished with the highest winning percentage that this program has had in 21 years.
So an exciting way to finish. And what did it mean to this program, especially the players who, we're waiting through the fall, hoping to get a chance to play, to ultimately get to do that, play some Big East opponents, but try to get as many college matches as you could in an unusual year?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you're talking about athletes and what they want the most, they are rewarded with their competition. So it meant the world to them to play, as I know it did for all different sports all across the country. We're at a pretty unique point with this program where we had finished 2 years of us as a staff working with this team and going into year 3 when COVID hit. And we had an enormous amount of momentum and a real excitement from our athletes heading into year 3. And so they were jazzed and ready to go. Then we're saddled with this big challenge of COVID. We get shut down in the middle of a spring training block, and that carries on to not even being able to play in the fall. So I know that there was definitely a lot of emotional turmoil across the board, coaching staff, players, everybody was really heartbroken to not be playing in the fall. But ultimately, it looked different than we would ever have expected, but it worked out, and we ended up having a great year.
5 seniors on the roster. How important was it to get some more experience in this shortened season, knowing you have a lot of pieces you'll be replacing down the road?
Yeah, so, we, again, such a unique time for us. We did have 5 seniors. We also had a large group of freshmen coming in. And so speaking to the piece of getting them more experience, um, we really had the ability to rely heavily on those seniors this past year. And not only were they helpful and just incredible at what they did when it came to competition, they got us through COVID. They did such a wonderful job of helping us bring in freshmen virtually at first in terms of participating in meetings and understanding what the expectations were. And then throughout an entire fall where there was no competition, only training. And I got to tell you, when you train for that long with no competition, sometimes it's a little difficult to keep motivation high. We pride ourselves on having a really exciting practice gym, but it's still not the same as throwing on the jerseys and competing against somebody else. So in that regard, our seniors were invaluable. We cannot thank them enough for all the hard work that they put in terms of putting everything they had into this last season to really bring DePaul to that next stage, but also to really help us incorporate these other players. We had some transfers, we have a large group of freshmen, and our seniors worked so hard to make sure that this was one cohesive unit. So really hats off to them. They were fantastic for us this year.
What's this offseason going to be like for your program? You play a spring season, and in theory, now hopefully getting back to normal, you'll be playing a full slate in the fall. So it goes from a long break to a pretty short turnaround. And I know in the middle of all of that, right now, you're able to start hosting prospects back on campus. So it's a busy time, it sounds like, for the program.
Yeah, short is the key word. That is how this offseason is going to be. We are a very carefully minded staff, especially with Marie at the helm. She has a background in sports physiology, so she understands the human body better than most. And so we've always made sure that it's a priority for our athletes to take time every year away from volleyball. Now, we're not saying sit on the couch and just pound hamburgers all summer, but we expect you to stay fit, stay active. But again, this summer is your time. There's nothing required from us. Reset the brain, reset the body, and come back this fall ready to go. So that's largely how we're looking at it. And we know that we have a group of athletes at this point that are really excited about keeping their bodies in great shape, about tackling different PRs in the weight room or touching a new height or putting themselves in the best position possible to really hit the ground running this fall. So it will be short and that will be challenging in some ways, but I think we had such a condensed amount of success. We made it through the entire fall and spring with no COVID positives, no COVID pauses. So we really had the opportunity to make big gains in terms of our physicality and our understanding of the sport. So our vibe right now is that we've got an entire team that is just chomping at the bit to get back in here this fall. So take care of the bodies, take a little time, a little R&R time to relax the brain, relax the body, and then we hit the ground running in early August.
Lastly, before I let you go, Athletic Director Dwayne Peavy always talks about dreaming big within the athletic department. I know volleyball, no exception. So how is this program planning to dream big going into next season?
Yeah, it's just been so much fun being around Dwayne's energy. I mean, he's such a motivated and passionate person, and he has encouraged every single one of the coaching staffs for all of the sports to figure out what they need to be the most successful and plan where they want to be. So for us, that's kind of a two-pronged answer for me. There's a logistical side of things where what we would like to see and to have to really be competitive. And so for us, we're seeing it left and right now, which is the renovation of the building that I'm in currently, the Sullivan Athletic Center, and specifically McGrath Phillips Arena, which is where we play all of our games. Currently, I just took a little walk downstairs and I saw that they painted in permanent volleyball lines onto the basketball courts down there. So that's a big win for us. They're refinishing the floors, and there's talk over the next couple of years about new video boards, new bleacher renovations. And Dwayne's already done an incredible job of updating the facade. So new paint, new furniture, a whole new look to the entire department. So that's kind of the more logistical side, which, listen, at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily help us win more matches, but it's always really nice to have from a recruiting standpoint. But the biggest part of Dream Big for us is where this program expects to be and where we plan on going. And so for us, that's making it into the top 4 of conference. The top 4 teams at the end of regular season qualify for the Big East tournament. So we are very excited to make a big push to make it into that Big East tournament this year. And once it's down to the final 4 teams, you just got to win 2 matches to win conference. So that's kind of step number 1 for us, is get into that top 4 and make a push to bring home our first Big East Conference championship. And then sustainable success is something that's always really important to us. Let's not just be a flash in the pan and be good for a couple of years and then drop back down. We want this thing to be sustainably good. And so our goals ultimately in the next few years are to establish ourselves consistently in the top 3 of conference, be competing for that Big East championship every year. But hey, there's some good teams out there. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. And our expectation is to maintain an RPI that's high enough that we're going to be qualifying for the NCAA tournament as an at-large team, whether or not we win our conference. So that's where we're planning on being at. Top 4 in the next year, and then consistently in the top 3, competing for conference championships and making the NCAA tournament on a regular basis.
Love the ambitious goals, Coach. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy summer here to join us here on the Blue Demon Download.
My pleasure. Thanks again for having me. It's been super fun talking with you.
Take care, Coach. Thank you again to Coach Vogel for joining us on the Blue Demon Download. I also had the chance to speak with cross country and track and field head coach Dave Dopek to discuss his program's return to competition this spring. Well, this week we're joined by cross country as well as track and field head coach Dave Dopek. And Dave, thank you so much for joining us here on the Blue Demon Download.
Thanks for having me.
So take us through what this past year plus has been like for 2 programs. You have cross country, which last year you get to complete your whole fall season. Then COVID essentially ends the track and field season really before it gets going. This year, everything's in the spring. You have the shorter cross country schedule. You do get a pretty full slate of track and field, but just what was it like to have so many different athletes to juggle and not really knowing when competition would resume for either team?
Well, I mean, the juggling part, it's pretty consistent with what we always have to do, because the difference with cross country is, yeah, they may be traveling to different locations, but during indoor and outdoor track, we're all going at the same time anyway. So that part was fair and somewhat easy to manage. But truthfully, the more difficult part was having to navigate, a cross-country season that amounted ultimately to 2 meets, a meet to kind of knock the rust off, and then a meet that was our conference championship, which was our first travel in several months, 7 months, 8 months, where we traveled down to North Carolina. And then that happened a week after our first and only indoor meet, which was a home meet in Chicago that we had down at Gately Indoor Stadium. So it was really interesting, trying to have an indoor season that, constituted 1 meet, and having a cross-country season that was 2 meets, all while preparing for what we hoped to be a full slate of outdoor track and field. Somewhat daunting, but I think for what it was, we got through it quite well.
The beauty with especially the running sports, like a cross country, you can train in your off season just by running. But what did it mean for both programs to be able to put that work in and ultimately get back to competing against the conference and some of them on the national stage?
Well, I think the biggest part of it is, you train in order to compete. So you do all of your running, on the lakefront, or maybe you had access to trails, or, some of the easier or more accessible work that you could do during the quarantine and being isolated. But you still, going from March 13th all the way until February 26th or 7th for the first indoor meet, that's a long time to train without being able to gauge where you're at. And it was a week before that cross country got to open up their season. So it's difficult, and what does it mean once you get your feet wet and you start competing? You start to recognize how much more you like competing than training, and how much motivation, getting out there, putting on the uniform, how much more motivation there is in that than just, waking up in the morning and getting a lift in or getting a run in. So I think, one of the comments that I commonly talked about going through this was we wanted to make this year a celebration, and it wasn't like a party celebration, but it was like a celebration of the thing that we love to do. And so if you are a distance runner who really loves cross country, then that needed to be a celebration, and you needed to be prepared to take advantage of that. And we had some individuals who did that. I can't say that indoor was a celebration because it was here and gone in 5 hours. But outdoor, while somewhat long and people were a little rusty, I do feel like there was, a fairly significant aspect to celebration. I know I was very excited when we had our first meet. I was very excited when we found out who was going to regionals or preliminary round of nationals. So it's been good.
How much are you looking forward to, on that note, getting back to what should be a normal schedule here in the fall?
Well, I don't know if I can honestly say I believe in the word normal anymore, because it's all a matter of perspective at this point. But should we be granted the opportunity to have a season that's a little bit more along the lines of what we historically have had, it'll be a bit of a reprieve, not having to juggle all of the, behind the scenes parts of having competition during, a pandemic and quarantine and so on and so forth. But the flip side of that is it's not much of a reprieve because, we start in August and we'll go through June, and, the expectation is that we're going to turn what we've gone through and the adversity that we've had, we are going to turn that into a positive and basically have a reset. Like, we have to find some way to make all the work that we've done benefit us more than the lost opportunity, affected us. So it's going to be pretty interesting. I mean, there is a strong amount of hope and belief that we will have a season that's a little bit more historically laid out, and we're ready to take advantage of that.
What does it tell you about the culture within your program to have so many seniors who, weren't guaranteed they would even have a season this past spring, but for them to come back, put in the work, and ultimately get to compete, especially some of them reaching that NCAA prelim stage?
What it says is that to me, what it says is that we run our program, the right way. We want to win. There's no doubt about that. Our goal is to have conference champions, conference championships, individuals qualifying to the first, second, third, final round of nationals, and, strive to be All-Americans. And this year, there were a great many more obstacles put in our way, for us to be able to accomplish that. Loss of training, in March, April, and May of last year. The summer, depending on where you lived, was quite different. Fall training was a fraction of what it normally is for us. And so, when you think about that, and you think about back in May, we had 6 seniors opt to come back for, that final year of eligibility. And, they took advantage of it in various ways. Some were back in September. A couple weren't able to come back until January. And then we had the final few came back in April, And to see somebody from each one of those groups make it on to, the podium at conference, and then make it into, that first round of nationals, it speaks to the hard work that we put forward. It speaks to character, which is something that we recruit. We're not just recruiting athletic talent and academic talent, but we absolutely want individuals who have a high level of character, who can support each other and live up to the, the mission of the university as well as the program. And see them come back and work through everything, and then to have those successes, those school records that, we're 30, 35 years old, to see them go to nationals, to see them have that experience, it made all of the work that we had done behind the scenes really worth it to get there. And so, I think it speaks to the dedication of the individuals within our program and the high character that they have.
Lastly, Coach, Athletic Director Dwayne Peavy, he always talks about dreaming big within the athletic department from a cross country as well as track and field standpoint. What does dreaming big look like heading into next season?
Well, dreaming big is, Dwayne has come in with dream big, and we've always, as a track and field program, dreamed big. When, we want to win. We want our program to constantly be elevated within the conference, within the region, on the national level, and it does take time and it does take a lot of effort. And to hear a department-wide concept of dreaming big, it really empowers us to, kind of take the training wheels off or the restrictor plates off and really go after it. And, I think what that looks like to me is, having an even higher level of talent on the team, more of it, so that we can put together, large groups to go to the regional meet. This year we traveled 10, and that's 2 more than I believe we've ever traveled, and we had qualified in 10 events. So under the circumstances, it's amazing. But that's not the cap of where we want to be. And so, dreaming big is having more representation at nationals, not just the first couple rounds, but the final round as well. And, having All-Americans more frequently than we have. We tend to be on an every 3 to 5 year pace right now. And, we want to see it. We want to see it pick up. And so, judging by the recruiting that we brought in this year, the remote recruiting, which was quite interesting, we're on pace for that. We're on track to have a very successful, return to quote unquote normalcy in this upcoming season.
Well, Coach Dave Dopek, thank you so much for keeping us updated with the program and joining us here on the Blue Demon Download.
No problem. Once again, thanks for having me.
Thank you again to Coach Vogel and Coach Dopek for joining us on this week's Blue Demon Download. Reminder, Blue Demon fans, we'll be taking a look back throughout the archives all summer with Today in Blue Demon History. Today, we're highlighting one of the best men's basketball teams in school history, the 1978 team, and one of their wins over Loyola Chicago. For a complete look back at Today in Blue Demon History, follow at DPUAthDev today on Twitter and Instagram. For the latest on all things DePaul athletics, visit DePaulBlueDemons.com. Now to send us out today with our Now We Must Minute is DePaul.
The relationship between DePaul University and Chicago, I wish I could bottle it up and just be able to let a little bit of that magic out all the time, because it's, we were together, we were strong. I was in a wonderland, because to be a high school student in Chicago and then get together with a group, especially Coach Meyer, the way he recruited me, it was magical. At Westinghouse, our gym was on the 5th floor, and we had no elevator. So, Coach at his age would come up to see us play every day, and every game we had. And that was one of the determining factors of me going to DePaul, or even really getting to Coach Meyer. I think Coach was like 66, 67 at that point. Bad knees. He always talked about bad knees. I was like, I know you're on the radar, Coach, and I've already said that DePaul is one of my schools. And the most magical moment, it wasn't on the court. It was when he told me, he said, you know what? I just like watching you play. All of Chicago recruited me. There's no way I could have left Chicago. There's no way. The whole city recruited me. It was getting on the bus. It was going to the local store. It was going to the gym. It was like, okay, UCLA's after you. They're after you, but you know what you got to do, don't you? Believe me, DePaul community will react back to you. They will, because we just need to get back together as a unit and just, let the community know we care. Let the different players around the city know that, look, we're out not just to get you to play basketball, but we're going to give you an experience. We're going to give you a college experience. I'm so excited to see that type of thing is really starting to bubble up, and all the players that used to be here at DePaul are starting to get excited. So, we're gonna really be a part of it. We're with you. We're backing DePaul University. Whatever we need to do, we're there. We're gonna be there, and I'm gonna definitely make myself visible in anything you need.